Welcome to Fluent Career English. Today we are going to practice an important workplace communication skill. Our topic today is how to talk about stress at work in English. This lesson is designed for A2, B1 English learners who want to improve their workplace communication and speak more confidently in professional situations. In many workplaces, people sometimes feel pressure because of deadlines, responsibilities, and complex tasks. Stress is a normal part of professional life. However, communicating about stress in a clear and professional way is an important skill. In today's lesson, you will learn how to explain stressful situations at work, how to talk about workload professionally, and how to communicate with coworkers and managers when you feel pressure. You will practice workplace conversations, useful vocabulary, sentence patterns, and speaking exercises. When you see the word repeat, please say the sentence out loud so you can practice your speaking. Let's begin with a simple workplace conversation. Sophia, have you ever experienced stress during a project at work?
Yes, sometimes projects can be stressful when deadlines are close.
That is very common in many workplaces.
However, good communication can help reduce stress.
Exactly. Let's practice explaining a stressful situation. I have been working on several tasks this week, and the workload has been quite demanding. I have been working on several tasks this week, and the workload has been quite demanding. The project deadline is approaching quickly. The project deadline is approaching quickly. However, I am organizing my tasks carefully to stay focused. However, I am organizing my tasks carefully to stay focused. Excellent speaking practice. Now, let's learn a useful structure for talking about stress at work. When discussing stress professionally, it is helpful to explain three things. First, explain the situation. Second, describe the challenge. Third, explain how you are managing the situation. Let's practice. I am currently managing several important tasks. I am currently managing several important tasks. The workload has been challenging because multiple deadlines are approaching. The workload has been challenging because multiple deadlines are approaching. However, I am prioritizing my tasks and focusing on the most urgent work. However, I am prioritizing my tasks and focusing on the most urgent work. Excellent. Now let's listen to another workplace conversation. Sophia, imagine you are discussing workload with a coworker. What might you say?
I would explain that the project requires a lot of attention.
That is clear communication.
I would also explain that the team is working hard to complete the tasks.
Excellent explanation. Let's practice expressing that idea. This project requires a lot of attention and careful planning. This project requires a lot of attention and careful planning. Our team is working hard to meet the deadline. Our team is working hard to meet the deadline. Collaboration helps us manage the workload effectively. Collaboration helps us manage the workload effectively. Excellent speaking practice. Now let's learn some useful vocabulary for discussing stress at work. Workload. Workload refers to the amount of work someone must complete. My workload has increased because several projects are in progress. My workload has increased because several projects are in progress. Deadline. A deadline is the time by which work must be completed. The deadline for this project is at the end of the week. The deadline for this project is at the end of the week. Pressure. Pressure describes the feeling of stress caused by responsibilities. Managing pressure is an important professional skill. Managing pressure is an important professional skill. Excellent. Now let's practice another workplace scenario. Sophia, imagine you need to discuss stress during a team meeting. What would you say?
I would explain the workload and discuss possible solutions.
That is a professional response.
Talking about solutions helps reduce stress.
Exactly. Let's practice expressing that idea. Our team has been working on several demanding tasks. Our team has been working on several demanding tasks. The schedule is challenging. However, we are making steady progress. The schedule is challenging. However, we are making steady progress. Discussing priorities may help us manage the workload more effectively. Discussing priorities may help us manage the workload more effectively. Excellent speaking practice. Now it is your turn to practice speaking. Imagine you are discussing your workload with a coworker. You can start like this. I have been working on several projects this week. I have been working on several projects this week. The deadlines are approaching quickly. The deadlines are approaching quickly. However, I am organizing my tasks to stay productive. However, I am organizing my tasks to stay productive. Excellent. Now let's discuss a common mistake when talking about stress at work. Sometimes people sound too negative. For example, someone might say this: "This job is impossible." This statement may sound unprofessional. A better response sounds balanced and solution-focused. The workload has been challenging recently. The workload has been challenging recently. However, I believe careful planning will help us complete the work successfully. However, I believe careful planning will help us complete the work successfully. Excellent speaking practice. Now let's practice a shadowing round. Listen carefully and repeat the sentences naturally. Managing stress at work requires clear communication and organization. Managing stress at work requires clear communication and organization.
Sharing challenges with coworkers can help teams support each other. Sharing challenges with coworkers can help teams support each other.
Planning tasks carefully helps professionals handle pressure effectively. Planning tasks carefully helps professionals handle pressure effectively.
Therefore, communication is essential for managing stress in the workplace. Therefore, communication is essential for managing stress in the workplace.
Excellent speaking practice. Now let's continue the conversation. Sophia, why do you think communication is important when people feel stressed at work?
Because communication helps teams understand challenges and find solutions.
That is correct.
When coworkers support each other, stress becomes easier to manage.
Excellent explanation. Let's practice expressing that idea. Communication helps teams manage difficult situations together. Communication helps teams manage difficult situations together. Sharing challenges allows coworkers to support each other. Sharing challenges allows coworkers to support each other. Therefore, teamwork is essential when dealing with stress at work. Therefore, teamwork is essential when dealing with stress at work. Excellent. Let's continue practicing how to talk about stress at work in English. In this section, we will focus on discussing workload with coworkers, communicating pressure professionally, and explaining challenges during team discussions. In many workplaces, people talk about workload during meetings and project planning sessions. Clear communication helps coworkers understand the situation and support each other. Let's begin with a workplace scenario. Sophia, imagine you are discussing project progress with a coworker and you feel a little overwhelmed by the workload. What would you say?
I would explain the situation clearly and describe the tasks I am working on.
That is a professional response.
Explaining the situation helps coworkers understand the challenge.
Exactly. Let's practice expressing that response. I am currently working on several tasks related to the project. I am currently working on several tasks related to the project. The workload has increased because we are preparing for the upcoming deadline. The workload has increased because we are preparing for the upcoming deadline. However, I am organizing my tasks carefully to stay productive. However, I am organizing my tasks carefully to stay productive. Excellent speaking practice. Now let's practice another workplace situation. Sometimes coworkers support each other when work becomes stressful. Sophia, imagine a coworker asks how your project is going. What would you say?
I would explain that the work is challenging but manageable.
That is a balanced response.
It shows that I am handling the situation professionally.
Exactly. Let's practice expressing that idea. The project has been challenging recently. The project has been challenging recently. However, the team is making steady progress. However, the team is making steady progress. We are focusing on completing the most important tasks first. We are focusing on completing the most important tasks first. Excellent speaking practice. Now let's practice another workplace scenario. Imagine you are speaking with your manager about your workload. Sophia, how would you explain that the schedule is becoming difficult?
I would explain the tasks I am responsible for and discuss priorities.
That is a responsible approach.
Managers often appreciate clear communication.
Exactly. Let's practice expressing that response. I would like to discuss my current workload. I would like to discuss my current workload. I am responsible for several important tasks this week. I am responsible for several important tasks this week. Could we review the priorities together to ensure everything is completed on time? Could we review the priorities together to ensure everything is completed on time? Excellent speaking practice. Now let's learn a few additional expressions professionals use when discussing stress at work. The workload has been demanding recently. The workload has been demanding recently. The schedule is quite tight this week. The schedule is quite tight this week. Careful planning will help us manage the pressure. Careful planning will help us manage the pressure. Excellent. Now let's practice another workplace conversation. Sophia, imagine a coworker is feeling stressed about a project deadline. What would you say to support them?
I would encourage them and remind them that the team is working together.
That is excellent teamwork communication.
Encouragement helps people stay motivated.
Exactly. Let's practice expressing that response. I understand that the deadline is approaching quickly. I understand that the deadline is approaching quickly. However, the team is working together to complete the project successfully. However, the team is working together to complete the project successfully. If we stay organized, we can manage the workload effectively. If we stay organized, we can manage the workload effectively. Excellent speaking practice. Now let's discuss another common mistake when talking about stress at work. Sometimes people describe stress in a way that sounds too negative. For example, someone might say this: "I cannot handle this project." This statement may sound unprofessional. A stronger response focuses on solutions. "The project has been challenging. However, I am focusing on organizing my tasks carefully." The project has been challenging. However, I am focusing on organizing my tasks carefully. With clear priorities, I believe we can complete the work successfully. With clear priorities, I believe we can complete the work successfully. Excellent speaking practice. Now let's practice another shadowing round. Listen carefully and repeat the sentences naturally. Managing workload requires organization and clear communication. Managing workload requires organization and clear communication.
Sharing challenges helps coworkers support each other. Sharing challenges helps coworkers support each other.
Careful planning helps professionals handle pressure effectively. Careful planning helps professionals handle pressure effectively.
Therefore, teamwork is essential during demanding projects. Therefore, teamwork is essential during demanding projects.
Excellent speaking practice. Now let's continue the conversation. Sophia, why is teamwork helpful when people feel stressed at work?
Because teamwork allows people to share responsibilities and support each other.
That is correct.
When coworkers collaborate, stressful situations become easier to manage.
Excellent explanation. Let's practice expressing that idea. Teamwork helps coworkers manage challenging situations. Teamwork helps coworkers manage challenging situations. Collaboration allows teams to solve problems more efficiently. Collaboration allows teams to solve problems more efficiently. Therefore, communication and teamwork reduce workplace stress. Therefore, communication and teamwork reduce workplace stress. Excellent. In this final section, we will practice longer conversations about talking about stress at work professionally. You will learn how to explain stressful situations, discuss solutions, and communicate calmly when work becomes challenging. In professional environments, stress often happens when projects become complex or deadlines become tight. Clear communication helps teams understand challenges and work together effectively. Let's begin with a workplace conversation. Sophia, imagine you are discussing a project with your manager and the workload has become difficult. What would you say?
I would explain the situation clearly and describe the tasks I am working on.
That is a professional response.
Explaining the workload helps managers understand the situation.
Exactly. Let's practice expressing that response. I would like to discuss my current workload. I would like to discuss my current workload. I am currently responsible for several important tasks related to the project. I am currently responsible for several important tasks related to the project. The schedule has become challenging because the deadline is approaching quickly. The schedule has become challenging because the deadline is approaching quickly. Excellent speaking practice. Now let's practice another workplace scenario. Sometimes coworkers discuss stress while working together on a project. Sophia, imagine your team is preparing for an important presentation. What would you say to explain the pressure?
I would explain that the preparation requires careful planning.
That is a clear explanation.
I would also explain that teamwork helps manage the pressure.
Excellent. Let's practice expressing that idea. Preparing for this presentation requires careful planning. Preparing for this presentation requires careful planning. The schedule is demanding. However, the team is making steady progress. The schedule is demanding. However, the team is making steady progress. Working together helps us manage the pressure effectively. Working together helps us manage the pressure effectively. Excellent speaking practice. Now let's practice another workplace conversation. Sophia, imagine a coworker asks how you manage stress during busy periods. What would you say?
I would explain that organization and planning help me stay focused.
That is an excellent strategy.
Managing tasks carefully helps reduce stress.
Exactly. Let's practice expressing that response. When work becomes busy, I focus on organizing my tasks carefully. When work becomes busy, I focus on organizing my tasks carefully. I prioritize the most important tasks first. I prioritize the most important tasks first. This approach helps me stay productive and manage stress effectively. This approach helps me stay productive and manage stress effectively. Excellent speaking practice. Now let's discuss another common mistake when talking about stress. Some people focus only on the problem without discussing solutions. For example, someone might say this: "This project is too stressful." This statement sounds negative and does not explain how to manage the situation. A stronger response focuses on solutions. The project has been demanding recently. The project has been demanding recently. However, careful planning and teamwork are helping us stay on track. However, careful planning and teamwork are helping us stay on track. Excellent speaking practice. Now let's practice a longer shadowing round. Listen carefully and repeat the sentences naturally. Managing stress at work requires organization and clear communication. Managing stress at work requires organization and clear communication.
Sharing challenges with coworkers helps teams support each other. Sharing challenges with coworkers helps teams support each other.
Careful planning helps professionals handle demanding workloads. Careful planning helps professionals handle demanding workloads.
Therefore, teamwork and communication reduce workplace stress. Therefore, teamwork and communication reduce workplace stress.
Excellent speaking practice. Now let's have one final conversation. Sophia, why is it important to communicate about stress professionally?
Because communication helps teams understand challenges and find solutions.
That is correct.
When people communicate clearly, coworkers can support each other.
Excellent explanation. Let's practice expressing that idea. Talking about challenges helps teams solve problems together. Talking about challenges helps teams solve problems together. Communication allows coworkers to provide support and guidance. Communication allows coworkers to provide support and guidance. Therefore, professional communication helps manage stress effectively. Therefore, professional communication helps manage stress effectively. Excellent. Now it is time for the final speaking challenge. Imagine you are discussing a stressful project with your coworker or manager. Explain the situation and describe how you are managing the workload. Listen to this example answer. I have been working on several important tasks recently. I have been working on several important tasks recently. The workload has been demanding because the project deadline is approaching. The workload has been demanding because the project deadline is approaching. However, I am organizing my tasks carefully and focusing on the most important priorities. However, I am organizing my tasks carefully and focusing on the most important priorities. Now it is your turn. Describe a stressful situation at work and explain how you manage it professionally. Take a moment and say your answer out loud. Excellent work. Today you practiced how to talk about stress at work, explain workload challenges, and communicate solutions professionally. These communication skills are extremely valuable for teamwork, productivity, and professional growth. The more you practice these conversations, the more confident you will become when speaking English in professional environments. Thank you for learning with us on Fluent Career English. Keep practicing, keep improving, and keep building your confidence in English for your career.